Starting. Deconverted man here. I'm with John Buck, who's a cat. So, hi, cat. How's it going?
Hi, Dan
All right.
Dan, the deconverted man.
Dan, the deconverted cat. All right. So, we were talking about value. You can't get fact from value or value from fact. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Because, and so that's what we're going to be talking about that. And then, I don't know, whatever else comes to our puny brains.
Yeah. It's just kind of up in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Talk
we've been
about our
interacting on Twitter a little bit, back and forth.
because I was I don't know, you were poking around. I think what's his face, Craig Reed's
Yeah, yeah,
Hangout
yeah.
or whatever, and I've interacted with him a bit. And,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, he's a
so
fun
yeah,
guy.
the thing with the that you can't get value from fact. Peterson made that kind of popular, but like you had said before we went on, that this has been around long before that.
Yeah.
Who you're saying who
So,
had this?
yeah, it's David Hume, who's
Mm,
kind of a prominent part of the what the Enlightenment. And he was kind of a popularizer of the empiricist method. But he, I guess, kind of like discovered I guess, a problem with logic where using using only propositional statements, you cannot derive any sort of value by only using those propositional statements. And so from that, he had this kind of secondary, famous, I guess, uh, maxim to his name that all what is the phrase he used? Like all oughts. No. It's like uh, oh, reason is and ought always only to be a slave to the passions. So instead of basing values within facts, he kind of flipped it on its head so that all like all logic and rationality is something that is just kind of uh,
yeah, jeez.
we do in order to like confirm our own base desires and
Ah,
what we
jeez.
already want.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I'd be against that because logic and reason are mapped to reality and are our whims are irrelevant. Because it's maps to the facts. Nothing else matters. That's what I
that,
would say.
that's interesting because like on Twitter, I follow a lot of like uh, atheists and theists kind of getting in arguments, and occasionally you'll see people that aren't too well versed in logic and philosophy that say that like uh, a syllogism or logic
Mm-hmm.
is something that is just kind of theoretical and like has no bearing on reality. Like people want actual evidential proof for any sort of proposition
Well,
that's made.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, logic is going to give way to, say, maybe the scientific method,
Mhm.
or possibly some other methodology. But usually the science, well, it might be some other methodology, but because it's only so much it can do. So your conclusion, which I just talked about this in my rant hangout, but I'll go over it again because people get the fallacy wrong a
Mhm.
lot.
Which fallacy?
And
What? Okay, so explain that. What's the fallacy?
okay, so the fallacy is um, that because your argument is bad, therefore the conclusion is false.
Mm. Okay, I
So,
see. So like if uh okay, so like say
so
I
my
made an
argument,
argument. Uh-huh.
yeah, my argument is going to be thus: it's going to be lobsters exist, or I am a pineapple. I'm not a pineapple, therefore my light is on.
Okay. So yeah.
So
Okay,
the
so even though the your light is on, uh, you so if somebody were to use the fallacy, they would
mhm.
presume that your light was actually off, even though it actually is on. It's just you didn't make a good argument for why it actually was on.
Right. Yeah. Well, the argument would be that yeah, that you're seeing either it's false, and I've always been very careful, and I think every video I've done where I analyze a logic is to say that because the argument is flawed, we have to be skeptical of the conclusion. That doesn't mean we say yes or no to it. It just
Yeah.
means that's it. We can't go any further within the realm of logic, and we're not compelled to go any further. So somebody says, "Hey, read this book about this thing that I'm claiming," and I'm like, "Why?" And now you have to give me a reason why I should read that book beyond just, well, because in the book it proves the thing that I'm saying. That's you got to give me a decent argument for me to go spend my time and energy
Yeah.
on, looking into that. And so if you're unable or unwilling to do that, then I'm going to be skeptical, and that's the end of that. I might read the book because I'm bored, but I don't have any logical reason to do so.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, okay. Well, I guess this kind of brings back into my main point is like even okay. So this is my current understanding of David Hume's argument that no matter what um, fact that you give to me, that the the only way that that fact is going to be uh, persuasive in causing me to change any sort of to perform any sort of action would be if I had some like pre-built in values that were not derived from those facts, but I agreed with certain, say, implicit value statements that you had within your propositions. And then from there, I would logically agree with you. So, like, I think we brought it.
There's a flaw though, I would think,
Okay.
but I'm
Hmm.
not familiar with his writing, obviously, and obviously
Yeah, I'm actually
you're
not
not
either.
doing it
So I've been
verbatim
kind
or
of.
anything, right? But at any rate, so I was just want to throw that out there. People go, "Oh, you're straw manning." Those, yeah, we're both straw manning them. Okay, we don't know what the hell we're talking about. Okay, but okay, not
Exactly.
not doing a critical analysis here. But at any rate, there's a flaw because we have to at least agree to play the same game in
Hmm.
that we're both using the language of logic to win our argument one way or the other. So we already have an agreed value.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. And that seems to be kind of the way that we can um, kind of reach shared conclusions to like syllogistic moral arguments or something like that. So like say one of my propositions I would put forward is stealing is wrong. Like that's a kind of moral claim I'm making, and that's generally something that you would agree with, and that's not me saying I don't like it when I'm people steal from me. That's because I'm not making a statement about my own subjective feelings. I'm making a statement about what we both agree on is improper etiquette for action, essentially.
Right. Now we're going outside perhaps the bounds of formal and informal logic to some degree. Now, I don't know how big that degree is. I honestly don't. Because I think that, if we're going to talk about morals, we have to talk about ethics, which is usually lacking in whenever I see debates, against the theists, it's like morals are objective or subjective. And I'm like, they're both. Talk about ethics. They never do. And because the ethics you have, whatever that, there's a list or several different ones, but depending on that will then inform what moral choices you would make within that ethical system. Of course, since we're imperfect, we're probably not going to do any of it anyways, but the morals could still be seen as objective in regards to my ethics says that this is the way to aim at. So at least I'm aiming in that general direction, you know.
Okay.
But
Well, maybe we should make a distinction then between what we both mean between ethics and morals. So,
okay,
just for myself, I consider ethics as being the the rules of society which shall be punished by, or that which shall be enforced by, let's say, the communal governmental, like people are going to enforce these rules if you break them. That's what I consider ethics, just kind of freehand. Whereas morals, I see as something containing like obligation towards action. So like you could say you have a uh, well, I guess I'm using ethical, or no, you have a moral obligation to serve your country. That would be like a moral proposition. Whereas you have an ethical I don't know if it's obligation, but the ethics of our society is you do not rob banks. I don't know. Maybe that's too fuzzy between the two.
Um, I mean, it's your framing, so I mean, it's up to you how to frame the words in question. Let me find this thing where the bleep is the thing that I'm looking for. Hold on a second.
Mhm.
Here we go. Here we go. All right, there's the list I was looking for. Okay, I'm gonna put that in the real chat out here, and then I'm gonna put that in the chat that only we can see here, and it didn't paste the way I thought it would. Darn. But anyway, so here's a list of different ethics. Now, I happen to have utilitarianism as mine,
Okay. Hmm.
but these are all different ethical systems. Usually, with the theist, it would be DCT, which is the divine command theory. But they might
Yeah.
have that, and you might have any
Yeah. Yeah.
combination of these ethics, of course. Some of
Yeah.
these,
Okay. So that's a good way to distinguish the two of them. So like in regards to divine command theory, there's kind of the obligational like I guess argument from authority from
yeah.
essentially God
Well, I would
saying,
even
okay,
argue
you're
that,
supposed to be doing this. This is what like you were created in order to
yeah,
do, even though you have the option not to.
my
It's not
my
like
yeah,
mhm,
I have an argument that I've been trying to formulate for against DCT, that it actually isn't ethics, because ethics
yeah,
requires you to make choices, and DCT eliminates your choices
mhm.
because you're told you must do X, whatever that is, and it can change because
No, no, no,
the
no.
God,
It's not you must do X. It's you should do X.
no, it's, well, I would say it's you must, because God is telling you to do it, and if God is God and right or correct because it's God, you have to do it. You don't really have a say in the matter.
Okay, I see.
But it
Well,
depends on how the God is framed, of course. If it's a good God, then you would have to do it because it's good, even if it doesn't seem good to you. But if it's a chaotic God, then I suppose it then you're left to your whim whether you follow its commands or not. But
uh,
but at any rate, it doesn't. That's a side note, because all of these are recognized as systems of ethics, and so whatever your morals are would then map to your whatever your ethical system is, and it might be a combination of these. It might be you just take pieces of different ones, and you're like, I kind of like this, and it's like a salad bar, so you make your own ethics. I don't know,
mhm.
because utilitarianism was very simple for me. It was like the least harm to the least amount, the most good for the most amount. Okay, I can remember that.
Okay. Well,
the other
the,
ones are too nuanced, and of course
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm going to reject DCT because I'm a skeptic, so I don't have a D to look at anymore.
Okay. Well, here's something. Well, that might actually tie back into like at the very beginning where we were talking about how when we say something is beneficial, we're saying it's benefit. We always have to postulate what frame of measurement we're using in order to make that judgment, whether or not it's beneficial or not. This is something
Yeah,
I got had sort of a not a problem, but just kind of been confused because there's like multiple variants of utilitarian ethics where you might have kind of like Sam Harris's, as far as I understand, position where, well, actually, Sam Harris is too vague, so I'm just going to create this alternate system of utilitarian ethics where it's whoever is currently existing in this very moment that has the potential to experience positive well-being or negative well-being. So do we maximize all of the well-being of those that are currently existing, or you could say there's the utilitarian ethics of say maximize the potential well-being for potential people into the future. So like there's kind of a moral obligation now to have as many children as possible that will uh, likely have a positive experience of well-being into the future. That and or there's also kind of the thing that's usually thrown out with utilitarianism, like if you've created, say, an AI that has a much higher capacity to experience positive well-being,
Mm-hmm.
but it experiences that positive well-being at the
Uh,
like say it's a 2-to-1 ratio or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
there.
it's the essay or not essays, short story. Those that walk away from Omelas. I
I
don't
never
know.
heard of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's. Let me get it for you. Homeless. Those that walk away. Come on, Google. The ones who walk away from homeless. No, don't give me the Wikipedia article. Give me like the actual story. Yeah, there you are. Yes. Cool. There it is. I'll link it in there. I'm gonna link it in the thing when I edit the video thing of the thing. There we go.
Okay.
Say thing again. Thing. Okay. Um, I think this is one of those like my must read things kind of
Mm-hmm.
deal because there's
So
so
it's a
much.
short story.
Hmm.
It's a short story, or is it an article?
It's a short story.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You can't about 7 pages. Don't read it now. But at any rate,
Okay.
uh, it's one way to think about utilitarian ethics is within
Okay.
that story. But what I said, because usually I heard it framed as do the most good for the most people, like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the
Okay.
one, right? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's not taking it for a minute. That's why I said the most good for the most thing, and the least harm to the least thing, or the
Okay. So
least,
like including
because
animals or AI.
including the entire scope of the
Okay. So like even
world
including plants and.
and the world itself and possibly the solar system and universe. Of course,
Uh-huh.
now obviously we're limited, so
Yeah.
we can only work within a very limited scope of what we hope to happen. And so it's like, well, with whatever knowledge I have, I know that doing this, that cleaning my neighbor's yard will have the effect of making the place look a little nice for a little time. Beyond that, if chaos theory is true, who knows what doing that will affect in the larger scheme of things. And I can't really worry about that because I don't have any idea. But if
Yeah.
I did know, and if I did know that cleaning their yard would kill 1,000 people, then obviously cleaning their yard would be the worst thing I could do, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of like measured in, do you the whole trolley problem, do you flip the switch? Yes, you flip the switch,
Yeah.
you kill the one person, you save the money. But well, then it gets more complicated depending on who those people are. And I'm like, can you just flip the switch like until you derail the train? Maybe that's an option. Like, but obviously you're going to run into problems of the system itself. But the it's kind of like the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, where it's like it's illegal to run the red light, but there's times when it's permissible to do so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I look at it that way, where it's like, here's the letter of the law regarding utilitarian: do the most good for the most people, or the most things, and least, hurtful things to the least amount of things. And the spirit will be the morals that interplay with that. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Yeah.
up? Sorry, Johnny.
What?
Johnny, what's up?
What the?
What's up?
Okay.
Anyways, Johnny said that in chat, so I had to.
Oh yeah, yeah. I see. Okay, yeah, I'm watching.
He's like, "What are you
Hi,
doing
Johnny.
that for?" Randomly. So we're
I
talking
thought you
about
were talking to
morals and
me.
philosophy. Like, yeah, we're just gonna interrupt with a flashback meme to the past. Yeah, sorry, side tangent. They had these kids reacting to 80s technology, and I was yelling at them what everything was. I was like, no, that's a Walkman. That's a Walkman. That's a computer. That's a floppy disk. Is this the hard drive? No, it's a floppy disk. It's a 5.0 floppy disk. You anyway, so but so when it comes, hi Johnny. Yeah, hey yeah. When it comes to there are certain, like, you have to start somewhere,
Yeah.
and that's kind of with the a priori stuff where we go, okay, reality is real, let's move on. Yeah, and we just, whether, it's like, well, it might be a hologram, whatever, fine. Let's just assume that it's real to whatever extent it's real and move on from there, because we'll never get off, that ledge unless we just move forward. And minds exist outside my own. The world existed before me and will exist after me. All these sort of a priori things, and I think that somewhere in that would be like, if you're thinking just about humans to make the problem a little bit easier, it's like, okay, inflicting harm to humans, we know that pain is not desirable because we don't like to be put into pain. So
Mm-hmm.
unnecessary pain is undesirable. So necessary pain might be getting a shot, getting your tooth pulled, or whatever. And so if we invented a hypodermic needle that didn't cause any pain and was the same cost as the other one, we would be unethical to continue using the one that did harm. If we had a pain-free alternative that was the
Pain
same
free all.
price, yeah,
Oh, okay. To like some.
to doing
To,
like shot in the arm, right?
oh, okay.
Hypodermic
Yeah.
needle, right? So if you
Gotcha.
had a pain-free alternative to that, and it was the same price, and there was no, everything was exactly the same. The only difference is that one causes pain, the other doesn't. Well, we would go with the one that doesn't cause pain. Um, I think that that even the most hardened sadomasochists would still, because they only enjoy that in certain circumstances, and so there's only going to be certain times when they want to have pain inflicted on them because of fetishes or whatever.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm I'm still kind of fuzzy on this, but I've been thinking lately how pl pain is not kind of this one size fits all category that we can put all like negative experiences within, because there are certain times where, say, we'll undergo pain in order to get something that we value more so than that. So, like, say, I'm going to go through and exercise for an hour, and even though it's painful and I'm exhausted and it hurts, and it hurts even the day after from all that exercise, I'm doing it towards the more positive end of like getting more in shape. That's just one example of uh, how pain is not like universally a net negative, and so I mean,
Yeah,
it
but
works.
there again,
Mhm.
you have the same thing that if we could get the benefit of exercise and have no physical pain in some weird way, like, I don't know what that would be, but
Like
then
pumping yourself full of steroids.
yeah, I don't know, maybe. Well, I mean, the more you exercise, the easier it is to do to
Uh-huh.
some extent. So but still you're saying, okay, there's a cost benefit analysis, so you're still saying that this pain is acceptable because the gain is something desirable or even necessary,
Hmm.
so again, it is weighed against what the greater goal is. But if we
Yeah.
could eliminate the pain, we would, because we don't like, if we could exercise and it wouldn't hurt, man, everybody was just doing it all the time. If it was easy to do, we'd all be doing it, but it's not. So what the
Oops.
bleep?
Sorry, that was my phone. I was getting notification. I'll put it on a do not disturb.
When did a bike horn get you?
It vibrated first, and then it did its little notification sounds. And so, since I'm using my phone, yeah.
Sounds like a bike horn.
Like I just have a
Look,
bike
is
horn
there
on
a
the side of my
clown in
phone
his
that I
house?
honk
Like
whenever
a
I send a text.
surprise clown honking. My ringtone is a clown honking a horn. What? Honk, honk. Okay. Well, there goes that. We were just about to discover the secrets of the universe, and that ruined it. You ruined
With my clown horn.
Yeah. So I had this thought experiment I tried to put up, and of course, people picked it apart endlessly, of course. But it was the idea. The question was if it hurt physically to learn something that was true, would we still say the thing that was true? And of course, people were like, "Well, it depends what it is." Blah blah blah. I'm like, no, just answer the question. Stop thinking about it. No, wait, and I was like, well, because I'm basically asking what's more valuable, truth versus pain, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
So this kind of fits back. It works alongside my exercise example. So we're kind of having to weigh between the positive value of, say, knowing truth and like all the positive benefits that one can gain from that into the future, or the positive value of being physically fit and the positive gains from that into the future, versus the negative values that we experience of, say, hearing a hard truth, or the negative experience of having to go through exercise. And so I'm not sure. It seems like you have to like choose you have to either base your ethics upon a positive ethos, like a positive value that you're seeking to maximize, or create a negative ethos where you recognize an experience of life that is always a negative and trying to avoid that to as great of a degree as is possible.
or you could do a little bit of both, I think. But still, I would go back to the matter at heart, which is that these decisions are being based on some fact of reality, whether it's your personal feeling in regard to like, okay, it hurts when I squeeze my hand like this, but I need to do that to do this hand exercise, or that, and if I don't, I'll lose control of my hand, and I don't want to do that. It's like, okay, well, that's your subjective thing. Nobody but you can feel your pain. Okay, but it's still based on a fact within that parameter. So
Okay. So
in
so
that sense,
so
I'm saying there is a fact that we're basing the thing around. Whatever, and that fact might be hard to find or navigate to or point at, but there's some reality that we're basing it
yes, there's certainly a reality that we're basing it within. The thing is, it's not a reality in which, by putting it in the form of a fact, do we actually get the utility of this like primary value that we have. So like let's say the fact of the matter is I have this motivation for being physically fit, like built into my brain. So it's like physically a fact about reality. It's in my brain. This is the thing that's motivating me to be physically fit. But in order to make a like syllogistic argument of like, okay, here are the facts. Oh, this is what I must now do. Even if I include, I have a motivational value within me towards wanting to experience a motivational value within me that's causing me to want to undergo exercise and to become physically fit. When that value is put in that kind of fact statement, because like facts are kind of like always a third person objective external uh, perception of reality.
on. Yeah.
When you kind of step outside of the subjective and to turn that motivation into a kind of third person objective thing,
Mm-hmm.
it it loses its capacity to kind of create oughts for like how to act.
Okay, I think here's where the potential is to think of it this way.
Mhm.
We could test, we could have a brain and muscle and all sorts of scans going on of your physical body, and we
Mhm.
could detect what
Yeah,
you're feeling to some extent, and maybe even what you're thinking to some extent.
yeah,
And so we then would have an objective way to say you feel pain, you don't, you feel pleasure, you
yeah,
feel happy, you feel whatever. And
yes,
thus knowing that it it is a fact that X causes pain in you, but it also causes this little bit of pleasure because you know that doing this is going to get you to this
Mhm.
result that you're looking forward to. So
Yeah,
now we've objectively verified all of these components. So now where would the argument be? Because we've solidified it by a third party.
yeah. But when it's still in that third party position, it's okay. So maybe it's a case that in order for a value um, to motivate action or to help create decisions on how to act, it must be experienced through a first person perspective, perhaps. And like when you step out of that to recognize, okay, this person here has, let's say, this brain tumor that's making him want to uh, rape small children, something like that. This would be us having a third person recognition of like what the facts of the matter is for what's causing his motivations to uh, rape small children. That would be the third person perspective. But from his first person subjective impressions, this motivating fact, the brain tumor, let's say, what would be what is actually influencing his value judgments to say raping small children is the best possible thing I can be doing. This is the thing that I see as most valuable to myself. The reason I switched it over from exercise to brain tumor
Yeah,
is just
yeah,
to
yeah,
point
no,
out,
yeah, yeah, because
how
we
like
could
from
remove
having
the
that third
brain we
person.
could remove the brain tumor so that they would stop having that desire.
Yeah.
Now the deeper question would be, of course, if they knew that removing, if the person in question, they told them, okay, you have a brain tumor, this is what's making you feel this way. I was like, well, I don't want that because it's going to kill me probably, you know.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, but then you'll lose this desire, and then they have to make some sort of choice, of course. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole because we're saying, okay, well, what made that wrong beyond just the that we wanted to remove the tumor? Well, first of all, because the tumor probably is going to kill the person. That's first of all.
Well,
Uh, then
what
the other
mhm.
thing would be is, okay, since it is potentially going to affect other people, and we could then measure those people and their emotional response, and see that it was overwhelmingly negative. In fact, we don't even need to do that because we already have the data to show that that's
Yeah.
the case. So, yeah, but I'm just saying, pretending we didn't have the data,
Mhm.
if we just needed to do this experiment, and we go, okay, well, we now have the fact that this is hurting more people than it's helping. So, leaving this brain tumor in there is not helping anybody. Even though it feels good to you, it's not
Yeah.
helping anyone else.
Okay.
So, there you go.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a good distinction being brought up. So from, let's say, the point of view of uh, the pedophile, his primary value is to rape children. That's his ultimate, let's say, value within his own subjective perspective. In order, and so from his own perspective, it would be invalid to, or it would be against his ultimate goals to cut out that brain tumor, but only from outside his perspective, using from the like first person subjective perspectives of all of his potential victims, can we create kind of this um, like amalgamated first person experience, or like it's a simulation of a amalgamated first person experiences of all of his victims to realize, okay, they're going to experience negative feelings. And so okay, so in that case, whose values do we put more weight upon? And of course, we would put them on the children's, just because we, I guess it's kind of like one second step even further out, where we value children's subjective experience of reality more so than the pedophile's subjective experience of reality.
Well, I wouldn't look at it that way because I think that runs into possible problems. But I would look at it because it, to me, the age is not relevant or whatever it is. The relevant factor is the harm being done.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to reverse this scenario, say, and have all the kids have brain tumors that make them want to be with whoever
Mm-hmm.
and then you have it's like, oh, everyone is not going to be mentally harmed or physically harmed by this action, then it no longer is immoral because the whole immoral part comes with the harm. And if there is no harm, like if it wasn't a brain tumor, everyone was just born with brains like this, then you would
Mm-hmm.
be like, well, there's no objection now because we've proven this and this is the way it is. But then of
Yeah.
course you'd have to demonstrate that to be true. You couldn't just say, well, it was true in this one case that was, the oddball out. It'd have to be the bell curve of normal to make sense. And that's usually where our morality falls in, is that bell curve of what we call or think of normal, because it's like that's the zeitgeist, or however you want to say that word, I can never pronounce.
Mm-hmm.
But Zingeist, whatever.
Yeah. 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 Kind of the
Planner,
cultural norms
yeah, the
for.
cultural, and it's not just the cultural norm, but it's almost the worldwide kind of norm that's been the most successful over time of furthering society along. So at one point in the distant past, when we didn't live as long, it might have made sense to, you know, be with anybody of any age because you
Yeah.
didn't have that much time. And maybe that's still with us today for certain people in their brains, for all we know. And so, if that's the case and that's the truth of the matter, do we have then? Well, all, can we manipulate their genes so that they'll never have that in the first place, or do some sort of brain surgery to remove that, or whatever? Because we recognize that if fulfilled, their desire would cause somebody harm, and we don't want that. And we also don't want to do the opposite, where, well, if we just change all of them, then nobody would be harmed. And it's like, well, but that's the more versus the less. Here's the small minority that it's going to affect is however many people, say 1,000 or whatever, versus the tens of versus the 1,001.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that's a kind of a good point. We have we place a higher amount of value upon the subjective experiences of multiple people over the subjective experiences of a singular person. So like,
Right.
imagine the rapist had actually felt like physical pain when they weren't raping small children. That's probably a better comparison, because then we can actually get like, okay, where it's harm for either way, but in this case 20 people are being harmed, whereas in this case only one person is being harmed. Maybe we should euthanize them, or something, if
Yeah,
like
we should ideally find a way to cure the
yes.
poor person,
Yeah.
and if we have no cure, then we're gonna have to figure it out. What do we want to do with it?
Okay, so here.
Cryostasis or whatever the place.
Yeah. I guess this kind of brings in well, I have two different directions I want to go. I'll go with this first, because this is what I'm thinking about. Like regards to chronic pain, like
Mhm.
somebody born with an illness where their joints are all frail or something like that. And so it just in order to walk or move anything like that, they're going to experience some sort of pain.
Hey, don't be
Um,
spoiling Mr. Glass. I haven't seen it yet. It's not even out.
yeah, I actually haven't seen
I
yeah,
don't think it's
it's
out yet,
really
but I do plan on
yeah,
seeing it. But anyway,
yeah.
sorry.
Well, it's kind of
Yeah,
funny
but
because
they're
like
Mr. Glass. Okay, so yeah, yeah, so
sure, yeah, yeah. Okay, so in the case of say there's a Mr. Glass type figure where if he were to continue living, he would undergo, let's say, X amount of pain, or X amount of harm or suffering or anything like that.
hmm.
Whereas if we were to, uh, mm, yeah, if we were to say put him into a coma or something like that, until we get to a cure for him or something like that. I guess using utilitarianism, that would be the um, like optimal pathway to take in that case.
Well, not necessarily because there you have the individual that can say what
Yeah,
their choice is, and
yeah.
so
So,
you would maximize the benefit of the individual by saying, what do you choose? Do you want to go to sleep until we figure this out, or
mhm.
do you want to just suffer? And that's
Okay.
up to you.
So
And
so that's an
so in
instance
cases where,
mhm,
yeah, I
we're
mean, obviously
we're
they're gonna have,
valuing his personal agency
yeah,
as
yeah,
a choice
yeah.
maker.
Right, because if we didn't have, like with the brain tumors, like we're assuming we had a
Yeah.
safe way to remove it. If we
Mhm.
didn't, that's a different story because it's like, okay, well then what? We're left with bad decisions left and right, and that, sometimes that's the case where you get into that due to the limits of technology. I mean,
Yeah.
this goes, with like abortion. I'd rather not support abortion. I'd rather we don't need it, but we're not at that
Mhm.
level of technology. The reason why it's a thing and it improves society is because, well, we don't have a way to just turn off the reproductive system on,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
mechanically or something.
It's kind of like it's a
So if you
once it's
had a
started, there's a whole
yeah, if you
process.
had an on-off switch that only you could flip on and off, then you could literally control, when you were ready to have a kid, and then you could, have sex all you wanted, and it wouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Mhm.
And of course, education does lower that down and all that, but still, there's going to be cases where it would be better if you had a switch that only you could flip. Like nobody, like if they flipped it, nothing would happen. Like I'm talking, like, or it'd be like a mental thing where you had to like think of, orange cat explosion, and then you were able to have kids or whatever, or it's a drug you have to take, or whatever the deal is. But I would want it rather to be a individual control rather than drug thing, because then of course you have the government being in charge of who gets to
Yeah.
have kids, that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah, yeah,
dystopia,
yeah. That's especially with
nightmare.
regards to
Yeah,
like the Chinese one child policy and
yeah.
shit.
Well, that was, yeah, and
But,
they're realizing the fallout from that, and they're now undoing it by like paying people to have kids. So it's like they're kind of doing the wrong, like the now it's like we're going to fix this problem with a bigger problem, with a different problem,
yeah,
because there's going to be some consequence of that. Uh,
yeah, yeah. I think there was like some documentary or like short YouTube video. I think either from Vox or from Beam News that was really fascinating. It was like what 30 or 40 years later after the one child policy of China, and because at the time, uh, having a male child was much more valuable to each of the parents, and so they aborted all of the female childs, or all of the female children usually,
yeah,
uh, and so now there's this surplus of men in like in relation to women. I think it's like 4 to 1 or something,
yeah,
maybe
it's
even more than
really
that.
it's really rough.
Yeah, exactly. um, okay, have you heard of the moral psychologist Jonathan Haidt?
I I think I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar.
Okay, he's written a book called The Righteous Mind, which is kind of an exploration of like what people's moral intuitions are. Like
Hmm.
what sorts of things do people actually care about in regards to morality? And he through a lot of like questionnaires and different things like that, he kind of segmented it off into like six different categories that you could kind of like measure people on, especially politically, to see what what like values they valued more, or like what, not really virtues, but like what uh, yeah, values did they have a higher weight to or a lesser weight to, in regards to making moral decisions about like what's right and wrong. And so, especially in regards to politics, where people that are more on the left, they, oh, okay, so I'll go through the six moral foundations that he kind of uh, defined it down into. There is a care about there is care slash harm. So each kind of has the positive, like there's the positive element to it, and then there's the kind of like that they have a positive feeling towards, and then if that sacred value is kind of being inf- infringed in some sort of way, that also sets off kind of uh, our moral taste buds of anger against that. So, like libertarians, they have their moral value of liberty or personal agency as their primary, like that's their primary lens for like considering all moral decisions.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think this was sort of the personality
mhm.
thing that Peterson had and things like this were I don't know if based on Height's work or if he based it on something else,
Well,
but yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I
There,
think that's where I'm familiar with this from because I was like, this
yeah.
sounds really familiar to me.
Yeah, yeah. Peterson and Height. Peterson is more into like personal individuals' personality and like how that relates to how they see the world, and
Yeah,
not
and this
just
was like a
in
more
regarding moral
broad
values, but
study.
like what
Was
they're able
it?
to do.
Did he study the worldwide, or was it, or do you know
Jo-
offhand?
Jonathan Haidt. I think he's got uh like 20,000 maybe people that have kind of filled out his moral test quiz, probably mostly from Western countries. Um,
Yeah,
but you can see a clear distinction between like what politics a person has based upon like what types of words that they use in regards to like um, how they frame an issue in regards to, so like in the case of immigration, what was highly uh, I guess spread mimetically within the news was pictures of children in cages, and that kind of uh, really struck on liberals' perspective of uh, like care and harm. So because these children were separated from their parents and were experiencing like fear and trauma and all that, this kind of activated their moral reflexes against this happening, and so they read it through their moral lens and recognize this is a negative, and this is what they're outraged about.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I'd look. Yeah, I gotta look into that because it sounds really right up
yeah,
my alley. Because
exactly.
like the political compass test I'd recently taken, and last time I took it, I was like right near where Gandhi is put, and this time was like I'm down like bottom center, and I'm like, wow, I, I
Okay. Mhm.
I'm like I've shifted from the left way towards more the right and way down from from the upper field, and I'm like,
Mm.
wow, okay, well, I guess I'm old and jaded now. And my brother got a completely different answer. He was closer to towards Gandhi. I was like, okay, so we were trying to figure out what the differences were, whether it was because it was the very versus the somewhat agree and very agree, and we were thinking the differences were probably there. And I said, but there's certain questions that I answered no to that he answered yes to that surprised me. I didn't, I thought we were going to be on the same page. but we weren't, and that was cool. It's fine. Because I know I'm right.
So, so were you both like trying to get exactly the same answers as Gandhi or something?
No. I was seeing who, what it was just to compare because it's interesting. We both did the personality test, and his was very different than mine. Like I was reading through mine, I'm like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, I agree. I was just like, yep, everything. Yeah, I was like, yep. It was like, so I'm like in the top tier for narcissistic tendencies. I'm like, yeah, because only I matter. What are you talking about? Of course. And I like really low like compassion or whatever because I care about facts. So it was like all these things that were like this dated skeptic. I was like, it just knew who I was. Like,
yeah, it's pretty funny. Like, I had a couple of friends doing the personality quiz, and they were like ranked at like the 0th percentile for agreeableness, and so like they're kind of some of
that's
those
when you
people
ask them if they agree with the result, and they say no.
Exactly.
I don't agree with this
like,
test either.
This thing is wrong. This can't be right.
Yeah. How dare you say I'm not agreeable? Wait, what?
Yeah,
I'll
this
show
whole
you.
thing's bullshit.
This says I'm violent. Yeah. I'll show you I'm not violent. Here. Stop hitting me. I'm not hitting you. The molecules in my fist are just not moving out of the way of your face. Whatever. Technically, Vsauce has said that we're never touching anything. That doesn't matter. It still hurts. Stop.
I'm not even touching you. Bam, bam, bam.
The molecules of the molecules can't actually touch each other. Nothing's touching anything. But yeah, that's where of course, that to at some level where the fact of reality where molecules don't touch, but our sensory inputs are adapted to feeling touch regardless of that. So, however that works, it's like, well, it's like it's good to know what the truth is, and it's also good to know what how that works. Like but it doesn't help you necessarily in every circumstance because you run into the wall. You're still going to run into the wall. It's not going to help you to know what's going on. It's going to hurt. It's like, well, I understand this on this complex level.
That actually reminds me of like one of the tests that Vsauce did in his YouTube Red series, Mindfield.
Yeah,
where it was in regards to like people feeling psychological pain or it's a nocebo effect from.
Yeah, that's actually that's really interesting.
So what he did was like first psychologically prime them to say, okay, you're going to experience a really hot pain from this laser that we're going to inject in your arm or not inject, but to shine on your arm for about 30 seconds. And then we want you to rate how bad it was for you. And then they would hold their arm down, and then all they did was shine a little red light on their arm.
Yeah.
And then the people would be like, okay, it's getting hotter. It's getting hotter. Ow, ow. Can you shut it off?
Yeah, and it absolutely just was, no heat to it at all. And it gets more profound if you have actors respond to it first and behave as if it is hurting. Then the pain gets more profound and whatnot. Yeah,
but it just reminded me, like in regards to like the molecules aren't actually touching. Where even in those instances where there isn't like an actual reality of a laser hurting, laser hurting you, it's still you're being harmed from them.
You've convinced yourself that there's harm going on to some level. Now, I would be interested if they connected, more diagnostic tools to them to see whether or not they were experiencing actual physical pain in that location, because that would be another level to that tab. But at any rate, I had a problem with the other Vsauce thing where they did the trolley problem, because I think he lied to us. So I have a couple videos on that. But at any rate, but
Okay,
yeah,
here's a thing with the trolley problem that I've seen. Okay, do you think there's a distinction to be made between flipping the switch and it hitting one person in order to save two, or pushing a person off of a bridge in order to stop the train in order to save two? Is
yeah.
there a moral difference between those two for you?
Is there a moral difference? No. No,
Really?
I'm pushing the guy off the bridge.
Okay.
But there is a emotional difference.
Yeah.
You wouldn't actually
Okay.
do it. You wouldn't actually do it because you, in your brain and everything in your being, is telling you, I'm killing this person, which you are, but you're saving people by doing it.
Yeah.
Obviously, of course, I don't know what kind of humongous person at this point that I'm pushing that's going to stop a moving vehicle or whatever, but you know.
Okay. Okay. Well, here's why I think the latter is much worse than the former. And this is in regards to people's actions. So I feel like people that are walking on train tracks are risking their life a little bit more than people just walking along a bridge or riding a
Ah,
bridge or
yeah,
something.
okay. So you're
And
like,
so,
well, you guys put yourself in that danger, so
yes,
you
exactly. And
deserve to
so,
get the potential harm, whereas this person didn't know anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that
it's
might be
still
a
like
way.
it's
Yeah,
still the same ultimate outcome between the two. Like one person dies, two people don't.
right.
But I think because there's a difference in between like where the people are actually like I'm the person that decided to walk along a train track today.
Right. Or
There's a
you
little
could
bit of
remove
capital
that
risk.
as part of the thing and make it something else. But yeah, there's always a way to pick that apart. Like with
Yeah,
they did the ad Valium fallacy.
I don't
Um,
think I've heard of that. What is that
or
one?
ad Valium, or is it baculum? It can't be baculum, or maybe it is baculum. Well, at any rate, appeal to the cudgel or appeal to the stick.
Okay.
So if the idea is I present to you a threat or a suggestion of a threat that I'm also unreasonable or I can't be reasoned with out of it, and so this one example is I point a gun at you and I say, "Give me your money." You give me your
Uh,
money, not
I see.
because you want to, not because it's logical to do so, but because you value not being hurt. Or if I say, you know, you better, receive this newspaper, or I'm going to tell the soldiers. And if I
Yeah.
tell the soldiers, it's problems because they're gonna come
Okay.
do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. I looked it up.
So
It's the ad baculum fallacy. That's
baculum, okay, not
the
Valium,
appeal to the stick or
appeal
the
to the stick.
argument to the cudgel.
Yeah, Cardinal. I said that. Yeah. See, I can't pronounce things, but I know them. Damn it.
So that's interesting. That might actually kind of
So
fit with your disagreement with the divine command theory,
right,
where
right, because
like within Christianity, there's kind of the
do it or else, kind of.
yeah.
And also, they have the appeal to the carrot, which is the opposite flip side of that, which is you're appealing to the bribery is the one. So that would also not. I'm going to give you $1 million to do X, and you don't want to do X, but you're probably going to because you're going to get $1 million. So uh, but either one is malicious. So with that in mind, here's where logic runs up against some sort of moral quandary in that you have aliens come and say we're going to destroy the planet unless you do this terrible awful moral thing that you don't want to do,
Mhm.
and so now you have to make the choice between the lives of all these people and doing that horrible terrible thing, and also on top of that recognizing that they're performing a logical fallacy. So my way out of it is, well, I value logic, and I don't know, since you're breaking the rules there, I don't know what other rules you're going to break. I have no reason to think you're going to keep your end of the deal. So I'm
Mm.
not going to do it.
Mhm.
It's kind of like, the reason why they don't negotiate with terrorists is the moment you do, you give it, is you set this
Yeah.
never-ending precedent where, how many lights do you see? Well, I see 4 lights, because the moment you say what they want you to say, they have it.
Mm.
So, and it's like, well, no, the whole world is dead. I'm like, well, you know, you were going to do that anyways. I mean, it's like, or it might have been a test for all I knew, that if I didn't do it, then you were going to save humanity. So I gotta base it off logic. But somebody else's answer would be like, of course I would do the immoral thing because saving lives is more important. So it just depends on your ultimate ethical value within your ethical system, maybe. So
Mm-hmm.
logic for me is put somewhere above and or parallel to utilitarianism, and I don't know where, but it's it's like competing with it. Like, of course, I'll never get into that scenario, more than likely. But it's just if you get wiped out, it's not my fault. It was the aliens.
Okay, so maybe I guess to kind of bring it back to the first thing that we actually kind of had our disagreements on Twitter, where
Yeah.
I kind of put forward my I guess theory on why values are real in some sort of sense, but
Well,
not based upon facts.
but see,
Um,
they are real precisely because they're based on fact. Otherwise, you couldn't say they were real at all.
well, unless there are things that are real that aren't based upon facts.
Well, then it wouldn't be real.
Okay, well, here, I think is
Yeah.
we need to get a good understanding of like what a fact is.
Yeah. Well, here we go down this rabbit hole.
For me, what I understand a fact to be is kind of a third person objective statement about something that we recognize in reality. Whereas you're probably when you think of fact, you're thinking about that actual thing in reality.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
within logic, we're going to be always using facts in order to relate back to the thing in itself in reality.
Right. Exactly. And that's all I'm concerned about.
Yes.
Because not because I'm a skeptic necessarily, but I think I don't know how much hand in hand the label goes with it. I'm not really concerned that much. It's just a label, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But from my thing with that, this is the system. This is the game that I've chosen to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything outside of that, I'm not. It's like, if you want to convince me of anything, you have to have one of 3 things that I've told people many times. Empirical evidence, repeatable tests, or valid and sound argument. Have one of those 3 things, if not all 3, and then I'm convinced of whatever the belief it is. Of
What
course,
if I have a cudgel and I'm trying to get you to?
that's an invalid argument. It's like a cudgel away that won't invalidate my position. You might kill me, but you won't be right. And so that's really where I say that a dead man can't learn that they were wrong. And there's kind of a thing from I don't know if you're into Deep Space Nine at all, but there's this wonderful monologue from one of the villains
Mm-hmm.
that the one guy, the Wyatt, says to Golden Cot. I'm being total nerd here, but whatever. I'm assuming you know DS9. If you don't, whatever, go watch it.
I haven't seen any of the episodes, but I know what it is.
Okay, but at any rate, he says, okay, we're gonna have to kill Earth off because that's where the rebellion will form. He's like, you don't just kill them all. You've got to make your enemies know and say they were wrong to oppose you in the first place. It's not enough. Just killing them is not good. You got to make them acknowledge that you were superior and they should never have opposed you. And then he's like, and then you kill them? And he's like, only if necessary. Like, it was more important that they recognize that you're superior than to wipe them out, because then they didn't learn anything. Now, obviously, that's the negative approach to look at it, but and there's a positive way to look at it. If you the only way to win is for your opponent to realize that they were wrong.
Yeah, I think there's like a phrase from some famous president, like in order to live the good life, uh, or the best revenge is living a
It's
life.
living well, yeah, it's a life lived well. Well, I guess if you're rubbing it in their face, I don't know. But regardless, that ideally, if we both value the system of logic and we go into a debate, one of us will win on a technical level, if nothing else. And
Mhm.
the other one should ideally convert to that side, so to speak, and say, well, the argument was sound, so that's it. Of course, that doesn't play out hardly ever. I've never seen it play out, but except in schools and stuff like that, you'll see it play out. But there comes that sort of more ethereal emotional thing, like what you were talking about, where it's like, well, my values aren't really determined on fact; they're more determined on feeling. And I'm
Yeah.
saying, well, but feelings are determined on fact. So you can't remove fact from the equation.
Well, okay. So here's maybe the term fact is uh, maybe not the best term that we could be using, because within a system of logic, fact is kind of that third person scientific objective understanding of the thing in itself, absent its relation to people's personal opinion. So it seems kind of weird to say,
Okay,
like,
so that would be your version of that word, and
yeah.
my version. So that'd be F1, let's say, and then mine would be F2, and mine would be that it's true whether we know it, understand it, accept it, etc. It's just it is a part of reality. It is how things are, and that is
Mhm.
what makes it a fact. Is it's
Okay, so
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 I would say it's interchangeable with the word real. Is where
yeah,
I
okay,
would go.
yeah, that's good. And then okay, so when I think of fact, I think like anybody's personal opinion about a certain thing doesn't fit within the category of fact,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to me. But
Right.
that person's personal opinion certainly is real, and so like it's based upon reality, for sure. But because it is an opinion, it seems kind of to, I guess, break the logical term of what a fact is, something that is a thing in itself, or an aspect of reality, regardless of someone's opinion about whether that aspect of
Well,
reality is
you changed
positive or
it
negative.
though because it was talking about feelings, and now you're saying opinion, which is more in the intellectual sphere of things.
Mhm.
So we're gonna have to stay consistent with if we're in the feeling realm or in the intellectual realm.
Well, yeah. So in regards to somebody, well, I guess somebody's personal metaphysics really kind of plays into this, like whether or not values are something, a component to reality, regardless of people's opinions about that or not.
Well, at some level, it would have to be somewhere because then otherwise you're just no longer dealing with things that matter at that point. And then I mean,
So
you can't
opinions don't matter.
if you go down that route, yeah.
Okay.
But if your opinion is based on fact, then yes, it matters. But if it's based on some of whimsy, or it just depends what the opinion is. But that's within the intellectual sphere because my opinion is going to be formulated based on things that I know, based on experiences, etc. Whereas my feelings are kind of a different matter. That I might suddenly burst into anger because I have bad anger control and I didn't take my pills or whatever. Well, it's happened. It's happened to me. It's not fun. And so that's not rational. That's not a rational part of me.
Yeah.
That's a part of me I'd rather expunge. Uh, Even though I say that, and people go, "Okay, you're telling me you have an anger problem. I understand that. I hear it." But then all of a sudden, when I start to lose my mind and start being angry, they seem to have forgotten that this is not because I'm a jerk. This is because my brain did its thing, and they're blaming me for something that's not my fault, quote unquote. And it's like, well, here's that whole free will versus determinism versus all this thing is somewhere in there because we don't like when people get angry. And so knowing the intellectual is almost in a different way than feeling that that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Because like I learned in anger management class, because I don't have a problem talking about that this is a thing that I do experience. Because it's on record, I have plenty of examples of me losing my anger control, which is unfortunate. Hopefully, I've gotten better, but that you can't change anyone else. You can only change yourself. And I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And
Yeah.
intellectually, it was there. But until I started repeatedly seeing that this was true, it didn't like click. So there is some thing about emotions that in our brain that makes things feel more real, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay. So,
But that doesn't make it actually more real because the fact was still true, whether or not I felt like it was true. It's just internally in my own brain, it felt more true now that I've seen that it was true versus
yeah.
just hearing that it was true. You know.
So this is kind of how I can like. You're very right. There's kind of an intellectual understanding of reality, and then there's the kind of like emotional or understanding of reality. And
Yeah.
so I see it as like through the scientific lens of methodological naturalism. That gives you an entire picture about what the world exactly is. Like you can see, okay, this is a table, this is a chair, this is this is a pair of hyena cubs fighting to the death as soon as they exit the womb. That's like something that we can see. This is perfectly like everything kind of contains its own weight of that's all. There's no like this is good is and this is bad is. These everything just is. And then when we're looking at the world through our own subjective understandings of reality. Like I'm looking at the world from an emotional point of view, with my own subjective feelings and all my values and all those things. And I see, okay, there's two hyena pups fighting to the death, immediately exiting the womb. And this is like, oh, wow, that's that's kind of horrifying for me from my own subjective experience of like what I think ought to be. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's kind of that divide between as a subject, you have an impression about what you would wish the world to look like that is kind of it's not independent of what the world actually is because it's like based upon okay, this is like the world as it actually is right now is I have a couple $100 in my bank account and I would like to see the world in which I have a couple more $100 in my bank account or something like
Maybe
that.
a million would be good.
So it's not like it's completely
You hear that, universe? We want $1,000,000 in our bank accounts.
well, now you're being unrealistic.
Hey, look, you never know. The universe might do it.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, no, I get but it's still whether you're born with this brain that makes you feel X, Y, and Z and think X, Y, Z, or you're nurtured
Yeah.
that way or a combination thereof. It doesn't matter. The end result is still that you are going to make a judgment based on some underlying fact about your biology that's still there.
No.
And whether
No.
that
I'm not.
whether we can extract,
Yeah. Yeah.
whether we can extract that out anywhere else is maybe a different. That's probably where we're getting the disconnect.
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
I certainly agree. It would be like something objective about reality that I'm basing my
Yeah,
understanding about.
that's
Like,
what I'm saying is that
yes,
that that
but Okay, so yeah, every time you're using the word fact, you're
Yeah.
meaning reality, whereas every
I'm
time
just
I'm
gonna say
using the word
real
fact,
from
I'm
now
yeah,
on, or
I'm
F2. I have to remind myself.
okay. But okay, so yeah, in that sense, my argument that I made on Twitter, which I'll go through in just a second, is using that scientific understanding of what a fact is, and that's also kind of the logical, I think, usage of the word fact in regards to things absent. Well, yeah, it's so complicated because like obviously values are a component to reality because we're components of reality and we're the ones actually acting upon our values. Uh,
Right, right.
and so it
So
must
you,
be
you see the disconnect that is the. It might be the natural language problem. I'll submit you that. I'll grant you that because there's no way around that.
yeah.
There's no
Okay.
solution to it.
So when I or what I and also Hume is speaking about in regards to values cannot be derived from facts, we're using the latter term, which is or maybe I put it in first, but the scientific kind of like we look at reality from an objective lens, like devoid of personal subjective opinions about that reality. So like when the biologists are watching the hyenas, they're personally as like human beings with empathy and all that. They're seeing this attack of these two cubs against each other to the death as being something kind of horrendous, but because they do not add that like that their subjective impression of reality is not what gets put into the scientific facts about reality. Am
Right.
I making sense with that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And so when Hume is saying you cannot derive an ought from an is, or you cannot derive values from facts, he's using the scientific kind of understanding of like, okay, this is what all the world is,
Mhm.
and I guess the point that is attempting to be made is that within the methodological scientific framework, there isn't like if we use methodological scientific framework in order to base every fact about reality, we
Mhm.
have an entire what is it, Laplace's demon? I think we have like every fact about reality,
Mhm.
and that from the scientific kind of objective perspective, we would still have no way of actually determining action of some sort because we haven't like I guess because we haven't like localized a subject in this worldview at all. Like in order to derive an ought, you must have a subject in order to for that subject to actually act within. And so
Well, it might be that the moment we understood all of reality, we'd also understand the solution to this proposed conundrum. you know,
yeah, maybe if
we're
that
not there. But I get where it's coming from. But and I think you do too. I think we see
yeah
each other's argument, but we're just kind of like, okay, here's where the stalemate is that okay up to this point where I'm saying, well, this is real, or this is real, and you're saying, well, now I want to say it should be this way, or it could be this way. It would be better if hyenas didn't fight each
yeah
other to the death, or whatever the thing is. It's like,
yeah
well, you might be right. It might be better. Well, let's see what that would look like, and better in what way, and and then you get into that, and you go, but you're still going back to that we had to pick. We have to kind of have an a priori. I wouldn't want to meta ethics. Maybe would be the right word. We have to have an agreement on what the thing is that we subjectively decide is going to be
yeah
our starting point.
yeah
And at that realm, I'm happy to leave it and say, okay, we're going to say whatever that is. You say it's utilitarian. It's probably not the best ethic. What the best ethics is a whole nother thing, But there probably isn't a best ethics. They're all good and bad in different ways,
yeah
except for DCTs, But to take that one, but hey, there might be advantages to that one too, but only well, anyways, but that we say, okay, that we're gonna use that, whatever that is, as our a priori ethics, and then we're gonna build everything off that.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
for Sam Harris, it's like, well, I'm just using humanitarianism as the building philosophy, and I'm like, well, what is that? What's that worldview mean? Because I need more than just the label. I need to know what you're saying when you say that. And I might agree, I don't know, because I haven't heard your further argument. I've only heard you say that there is some secular way to do this. Okay, what's that secular way? That's what I haven't heard yet. But I've noticed that when it comes to objective subjective morals, I'm willing to say it both ways. That some might be objective and some might be subjective. That it doesn't have to be an all or none scenario. That maybe it's true that some morals or some ethical systems are objective and that some are subjective no matter what, because that's just the way that the universe works. Or it might be that they're all subjective. I have no idea. I just like the idea that it might be a mix of the two. So that's kind of, I'm in the same pool as everyone else there and going, oh, damn it, I haven't figured this out either. But at least, it's like we're all trying to aim at the same target. And then I think that if we disconnect the reality or the fact bit from it, that setting the natural language aside, and then I'm assuming you understand what I mean, but when I say that, that we're still aiming at the same thing. It's just I'm going, well, at the end of the day, it is based on reality. And you're going, well, but at the end of the day, I guess it kind of, well, it is, but then like it isn't because, well, like it kind of isn't though, because like there's this extra little part that I'm saying it ought to be that way. I'm like, well, but that ought is also based on something that could, like, you're not saying that hyenas should be able to spontaneously explode and then reassemble themselves or something like that. I'd be like, well, okay, maybe that could be an ought. Just like that ought to happen. Okay, well, that's kind of how would we get to the point where we could make them do that? That's another question. But why would that ought to be the way it is?
Well, okay, so that kind of like raises.
It goes right back to the ought has to trace back to something.
Yeah, and I don't know if it can trace. Okay, I don't know if it can trace back to an non-value laden statement about reality.
Okay, fair enough.
And I guess something I realized just when you were explaining utilitarianism, I realized like you had just laid it out how in order to have an ethic, you must first kind of place the first, I guess, axiomatic value judge. Axiomatic value.
You just have to either you're picking randomly, going, oh, that one's, or you're picking the one that speaks to you. And it might be like the political compass test or whatever, that there's a test you could take to see which one should appeal to you, or you should read them and see which one. In either way, you should get the same result, ideally. I don't know if there is such a test, by the way, but if you read through the different ethical things that I listed, you're probably going to find one or two that you go, okay, that speaks to me, or that makes sense to me, and then build around that. It might be, again, that you say, well, they all suck, I'll just make my own, or okay, well, I don't know what that would look like, but okay, but we're still in the same ballpark of that.
Nobody has the right answer.
well, not that nobody has the right answer, but because there might be a right answer or there might not be a question. Who knows? But that it's still linked back to reality at some point.
Yeah, because we're all existing within reality. We all have to make decisions within reality. But so whatever it is that we're using to make decisions.
You the natural language problem because I have to, and I'll grant you that you can't figure out how to see this being the case. If uh, from value, what was it you said? Value judgments.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to then grant me that it's still ultimately based on reality.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we
Well,
both
okay.
win. Yeah.
Okay. Well, here, let's bring forward I'm going to explain kind of utilitarian ethics as far as I can understand it and like how it's formed. So we start off, we have we recognize we experience pain as a subjective person, and then we kind of create this principle in order to build utilitarian ethics off of. The principle is pain ought never to be experienced, or pain ought to be experienced as little as physically possible. And that's kind of our central ought that we start
Okay.
with.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
our
from that,
primary. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
yeah, and that's negative utilitarian,
Well, yeah,
or yeah, because that's starting off with a negative premise, or it's not premise, but a negative
yeah,
moral proposition. Uh, you could do it kind of the inverse way, where like hedonism, where
yeah.
pleasure,
Is
every person ought to be experiencing pleasure as often as possible, and so that's my moral proposition I'm putting forward.
there's actually problems with that, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, definitely. If you read
I think actually,
Brave
I
New World, kind of
yeah,
goes into
I
what the
wonder
world would look
if
like.
it's more difficult to arrange the positive than it is the negative, because it's really easy to conceive of the negative thing,
Hmm.
like avoid this. That's easy,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the aim towards, it's not really that you're aiming away from, that you're aiming to pleasure, because pleasure isn't necessarily opposite of pain.
yeah.
It's just not being in pain, because we tend to not like pain, you know. So if I could have a world, a universe free of pain, and also the reason why it hurts when I stub my toe is blah 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 blah. Okay, so it's not just enough that I removed the pain, because I needed to know that I stubbed my toe, but
Yeah.
I only needed to know that in order to, because my body is structured in this way. So if I can make it that my body was structured in a way where hitting my toe against something didn't matter, it didn't hurt my toe, it didn't hurt the object, it's a completely different universe at this point, but I'm still getting to, I'm aiming towards that imaginary star,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
unreachable star.
So here's something I was actually thinking about either earlier today or maybe just yesterday. That was kind of in regards to exactly this. I'll just read it off and then we can discuss it.
Yeah, okay.
Pain is not a negative in and of itself. It is a messenger to a problem. When you have a
Yeah.
series of problems, you first do not know what they are and only have the negative emotions that arise from that. And so you must pin down what exactly is behind those emotions, pain, that gives rise to them. And you can understand that it's the problem itself that is the negative. Same goes for distinguishing good things. We don't understand why we like certain things or people. It's only the positive emotional responses that we have at first, like have happiness or see somebody as being admirable for some reason we don't know why yet. Like with Haidt's moral foundations, but it would be a category error to say that the second order processing of a phenomenon, that's in regards to the emotion or pain or pleasure, are the constructors of the phenomenon, whatever led to those subjective experiences to be had. So I guess it, like utilitarianism is kind of a good understanding, but it might be that by using pain as your ultimate negative, you're kind of not understanding the utility of what pain is actually useful for in regards to organic creatures. So
Well,
like,
yeah, that's where it becomes. Well, for me, I don't base it on pain, but
yeah.
I do think that that's a potentially good starting point. But there's other starting points and other things to consider.
Mhm.
But it is a starting point, not the. And I don't know if
Yeah.
there is a the, but it at
Yeah.
least gets you going. At least gets the ball rolling. Then you can add complexity after that. But yeah, I mean, any, like I said, any of the ethical systems, I don't think that there's one better or best than the others, but that's what would be called meta ethics, where you're looking at all the ethical systems and you're going, okay, well, which one's the best in this situation? And then your brain, explodes, which is probably bad for you and your brain to some extent, but I don't know what that extent is. Not a desirable outcome for you because you're dead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. What really got me interested in this whole problem was a book I read by actually a negative utilitarian named David Benatar called Better to Have Never Been. And he put forward the philosophy of antinatalism, which is that because pain is something that is necessarily going to exist within a person's life, in order to avoid any pain to be experienced at any point into the future,
Yeah,
people ought not to have children
yeah, I've
because
heard this. I've heard this taken to the extreme that we should
yeah,
nuke we should nuke the entire planet to wipe out all living creatures so that there can be no pain.
yeah.
Now, there's a
That's
problem.
like even going even
Yeah,
further than antinatalism. That's
yeah,
the promortalism, I think.
right.
Yeah,
But this goes back to my view of, at least for me, within my moral framework, because it's more than just the ethical system of utilitarianism. There's also the logic component that I don't know if logic in and of itself could be an ethical system. I have no idea. So I don't want to label it that. But anyways, it's there alongside of it. And the problem with wiping everyone out or not having babies, because that would eventually the human population would be wiped out, other animals would take over, whatever. But in either case, it's like killing your opponent. You didn't win because nobody is there to know that you won. So if nobody
yeah,
is there to know that you've eliminated
yeah.
pain, it doesn't count.
Exactly. And this is why I kind of made the distinction between a positive ethos or ethics and a negative ethics. So like negative utilitarianism or
Yeah.
like there's quite a few different like negative ethics that you can kind of build off of. Like I guess one like negative or moral proposition that's put forward by libertarians is that theft is wrong, and then through their definition of theft, taxation fits within that definition. Therefore, taxation also is wrong, and that's kind of like avoid theft or an imposition of agency at all costs. That's kind of like an avoidance ethics, and that's why I think in order to have a good moral I don't know. I see the negative ethoses as being insufficient in comparison to the positive ethoses, like
Well, yeah, you
virtue
need
ethics.
both. You need both. It's yin and yang. You don't.
Yeah.
I don't think it's. That's where I kind of same thing where I said with the objective versus subjective morals. I think it's both. That it just depends on how you look at it. If you look at it like I had the metaphor of the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, that's
Yeah.
exactly how I view morals interacting with ethics. Is that the ethics is the letter and the morals are the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
And and so they're both kind of subjective in the sense that I had to pick an ethical system, and they're also objective in the sense that they're aiming at an outcome. Whether I'll get to that outcome is another matter, but at least I'm trying. I'm reaching towards the unreachable star, at if nothing else, and
Yeah.
that's probably the best we can hope to do. Whatever our ethical moral system is, because we're limited creatures.
Yeah. It's funny. Something I was also thinking about, like there's a book I read on like how to train a dog. It was called "Don't Shoot the Dog" with an
Yeah,
exclamation point.
there you go.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, see,
and
now I
that's
have
all
to
about
disagree with. I
negative,
have,
positive and negative reinforcement for training behaviors. And so, like,
yeah,
you
positive
can
works
train
better
a
than negative.
rat to experience pleasure when it sees a light flash because it's associated that light flashing with receiving a food pellet.
Yeah,
And to the point where even when that light flash happens, they receive that positive element. And so there's a lot of times that you can imagine where people would have like false positives or things like that, where they're actually experiencing either negatives, like say in regards to the laser thing, that's somebody getting a would that be a false positive or a false negative?
I'm not sure,
Pain.
but at any rate, yeah, I get what you're saying. But yeah, it's been shown that positive is more persuasive than negative
Yes, exactly.
for humans. And of course, it's been shown with like spanking, it absolutely does zero benefit at all.
Yeah.
And you inevitably get the person's like, "But I was spanked and I turned out fine." And I'm like, "No, actually, you didn't because you just used bad logic. You did the
That's
appeal to
the
the
genetic
minority.
fallacy there.
This appeal to the minority of one because they're assuming that
Ah,
because they turned out okay, that
mm.
therefore everyone else is." I'm like, no, you're just on the bell curve on the other side. Okay, you're not in the middle here. See, you can't say what you just said because it's wrong. See, and then and I'm like, yeah, well, we can see how great of a person you turned out to be. And I'm like, yeah, see, proving my
So wait a
point
minute.
more, just keep going. They're so mad at you
So
at that point.
so there's a fallacy for an appeal to the minority of one, as well as a fallacy for ad populum. Is
Yeah,
that so? You kind of have two fallacies for
yeah.
both
Well,
alternate.
it's appeal to minority, and a subset of that is appeal to the minority of one.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So within my subset, I'm saying that I've experienced X, Y, and Z. Therefore, everyone else is going to experience that. It's kind of like, well, um, everybody that I've met that's a Republican is a terrible, horrible person. Therefore, all Republicans are terrible, horrible people. Well, that's an appeal to the minority because I've
Yeah.
only met however many
Yeah.
Republicans, or you could
I,
put race there or whatever the bleep you wanted there, and it would still be invalid.
gotcha. But okay, so in certain circumstances where like, so they if they were to do, let's say, testing on, let's say they were tests to discover that Republicans had a higher sense of, let's say, duty and honor
Mm-hmm.
within their personality, something like that.
Yeah,
Would it be, I guess, an inductive argument to then assume because of what the 500 Republicans that we tested, it's likely that the other people that also identify as Republican will also have a higher sense of duty and honor in their
yeah,
personality?
yeah. If the analysis of the people is broad enough, and the
Mhm.
questionnaire is set up well enough, then yes, you can extract decent sort of a bell curve from that. But
Yeah.
but of course,
And so that's an inductive argument, right?
yeah, it is.
Okay.
Well, it'd be more like it'd be an argument based on the data to some extent, but yeah, you have to of course look at the way that the poll was done and who conducted it and how and when and all these sort of factors, because there's a problem with polling is that if you, the person that's taking the poll, think that you know what I'm going after, you might answer differently. Whereas if you're
Okay.
and so we have to factor in that there's some sort of margin of error because people are going to try to
Yeah.
lie and
Yeah.
try
Kind
to,
of like it's really hard to get children to like speak honestly because a lot of times they're just kind of like reading off of uh your visual your facial feedback, and they're just trying to say exactly the things that they think
yeah.
that you're
There's
wanting
been
to.
there's been disturbing studies that showed
Yeah.
if you ask
With
the kid the question enough times, they'll give you the answer that you want. And yet,
yeah.
and yet, in the courtroom, when it comes to parental cases, they will take the word of the kid over the parents,
Mm,
even though we know the fact says we shouldn't do that
yeah.
because so it's like it's this thing of like, well, and there's that whole value thing and the whole question of all that stuff goes into play, and I go, look, we know whatever the facts are, that's what we should base the things on. But nobody wants to listen to that, so we're stuck with what we got, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
know. But um, We aren't all Christian nerds. I don't know what you're talking about, Richard. He's on his own. Like we're on our own talk in the chat at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my brain is worn out though. But this was really good. I won. So
you won.
I won. That's all you need to know. I don't know how I won.
Yeah, good to know.
Yeah. We both won. So at some level, technically, we didn't give any.
Well, it's your channel, so you always have.
Channel, I automatically win, even when I'm wrong. At the time, I thought I was right, so it's fine. Yeah.
If ever I was making a point and it looked like you were about to lose, you would just kick me off the call.
That's when the universe stopped functioning in that moment. The quantum singularity.
I don't know what happened. John broke out. Just when I was winning too.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I got another voice here. Something's all weird, wacky. No, but on a serious note, though, I think you made good points. And I do wonder.
It probably is a lot to do with just kind of like the words that we're using in regards to
the damn natural language problem. Yeah. By the way, okay, because I don't want to assume my viewers know what that means, even though I've used it many times. So natural language refers to, obviously, the language that you're speaking, reading, writing in, whatever that might be. In our case, it's English, but it might be some other language, whatever. But because words have different meanings to them, and people view those words in different ways, that's the natural language problem. And there's no logic within logic. It's like, we recognize that there's this problem. Good luck, and there's no solution to it that as of yet. There are languages that are constructed languages that are far more precise than English. But you would have to then learn that language, and probably the closest you would get be like mathematics would be the
so like just when we were having our discussion, we were using kind of facts in two different ways. Where
that's
like when I was saying facts, facts as components of reality. That is kind of, and then I was using facts as like statements that correspond with reality. Statements of about reality
had to be involved or something there.
Yeah.
Oh, it was very close to each other, but there's still some difference between the two, and so because of that, we have to so that we don't equivocate each other. We have to agree that you'll use F1 and I'll use F2, or let's just use a completely different word to make it even better. If we were to do this in a formalized argument type of thing, that's what we would do before the debate even started. Ideally. So, like, I have this one debate that's been a nightmare to set up, and I'm never dealing with this thing again. But at any rate, it was going to be about whether or not Yahweh existed anywhere but our mind. And it was like, oh, okay, I finally found someone to debate you. But turns out they actually just want to debate a generic monotheistic God. I'm like, great. What does that mean? Like, what do they mean by God? Well, they mean they mean by God a general monotheistic God. And I'm like, what? So they mean by God a general How am I supposed to debate that? So I'm like, okay, we're going to be debating a generic monotheistic God. And by God, they mean a generic monotheistic God. That's not circular.
Well, here's actually something I recognized that is exactly one of what was that term you used? The natural language problem?
Yeah, natural language problem.
Okay, yeah. In regards to exactly that topic.
Like, one more example. With Greek, there's 4 or 5 words for love.
Oh, yeah. Like agape, amore.
Agape, all that. And so it's like, why don't we do that? So then when I tell my friend I love them, I don't have to be like, as a friend, no homo or whatever the hell it is say these days. I don't know. But, you say philios, which is the friendship love. It's like, let's just do that. Why can't we just do that instead of let's just like adopt those words and make a more precise language. It's like, well, why can't we use
like
kilometers instead of miles? Because I don't know.
yeah. Well, a lot of times too, like usually the context around like the sentence that we're using in the context of the environment as well is like an added layer of like how to translate the verbal symbol into what the actual like specific meaning is understood as. But a
Yeah.
lot of times, like when you're reading books, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to be using words like a specific meaning of word, and you might be reading it according to the more vague or a differing definition of that
Yeah,
word.
that's why if you're really trying to study, it's good to look to you should assume that they're using the generic bell curve definition.
Yeah.
Because even if you don't personally agree with that generic bell curve definition, unless they tell you, I mean this, then you should read it however they're telling you. But that's the thing with reading any book, uh, is if any interpretation has to be done, and it is, we can't help it, you're going to come away with a different look at the same thing book that I did. And that's why we debate about movies and television shows and plays or whatever, is because you saw something that I didn't see in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
and because it had this slight little difference, we're gonna debate the hell out of that, even though there's no way to resolve that type of debate, because that's more in the, well, I wouldn't put it in, I'd probably put it in erratic dialogue sort of area than anything else. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so we aim for precision of words when we're more formalized, and
Mm-hmm.
and so with here we're able to do that. Whereas, and of course, if we did an actual debate on this subject, we would have it all set up ahead of time to what word we were using and what it meant, and so the audience would know and we would know and all that. And what's interesting when you get to certain words, they're like vague terms, more like, then there's problems that you just can't resolve, like what is, you're familiar with the heap of sand paradox?
Oh, like when does like how many grains of sand does it actually turn into a heap of sand? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
something
you
like it?
start with a heap of sand and you take one grain away until what point does it stop being a heap?
Oh, okay.
Well, it doesn't, because there
Yeah.
it, there is, it's like, well, if somebody is losing their hair, are they balding?
Yeah.
And
It's
that
kind
what
of it's
if
kind of
they have,
frustrating too because like within biology, like what is regarded as a species is it's hard to differentiate between like just variances within a species because like it's only at a certain point in time. It's like a lot of times what we regard as uh, a distinct species is insofar as it like in its relation to other animals around it. And so it's kind of weird, like in order to get a functional definition of like, okay, this is a flyhopper or something like that, it has to be built into the definition that it's this specific variant is unable to breed with this other variant.
yeah.
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
interesting about that, you reminded me of this talk I
Okay.
had with this young Earth creationist slash King James only
Oh
enthusiast.
no.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a good 6 hour long talk we had.
Nice.
And then the next time that was like 2 hours where he drove everyone insane, and that there were so many things that he just would not accept. But
Yeah.
we did get it to that there's this study done in California with two different foxes. I said, what's the definition of kind? And he said, it's two, if the animals can't make another of themselves. And I said, all right, we've got this fox in California, and one has gone north and the other's gone south. You know, oh, they've done it with human intervention. No, they migrated on their own, because there was another study done with salamanders where they moved them artificially, and he said that doesn't count because humans intervened with that.
Mhm.
So we were like, okay, we got the foxes. We got fox that went north and fox that went south, right? And he's like, right, I agree. He didn't disagree on that. And I said, okay, they cannot breed with each other because they're too different at this point to produce an offspring.
Mhm.
What kind are these foxes? And he could not answer the question. And he just broke down at that point. Fox A and Fox B were still foxes, even though they couldn't breed with each other. And because he couldn't reconcile evolution with his faith. The two
Yeah.
were too intertwined.
Yeah.
And no matter how I came at that angle, because I tried to come at it from a theological level, from a logical level, from philosophical level, every level I could think of to come at that, it didn't matter. It was just so entrenched in it in his brain. And it's just it's amazing to listen to. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well,
kind of like if you have time, if you don't want to listen to that, there's kind of, but you are interested in
yeah.
seeing cognitive
Yeah.
dissonance in action. That's what I was trying to get at. Uh,
Yeah.
is
Uh, I recently watched the debate between Inspiring Philosophy and Ken Ham, or maybe it was Ken Hovind. No, it's Ken Hovind. Yeah. And
oh
it's funny because they're both Christians, but Ken
yeah,
Hovind is a King James only young Earth creationist, whereas
I don't know
Inspiring
he was King
Philosophy
James
is
only.
an old Earth evolutionary
Wait,
Christian.
is Hovind King James onlyist?
Yeah, Ken Hovind is. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I knew he was a young Earth. I didn't know he went the extra
Yeah,
step for
and so it was so frustrating because like, uh, uh, his name's Michael Jones, I think, Inspiring Philosophy.
yeah,
He was using the like actual Hebrew words
yeah,
that the
I know this
and-
all too well. I had it as a Christian.
yeah,
Yom literally means a period of time.
yeah,
But the young earthers want to say, no, 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 no. It means day in this context, which it doesn't. It always means a period of time.
yeah. But
Uh,
it's so funny because whenever like Michael would say like in the text there, it doesn't even say rib. It means side. And then Ken Hovind was like, "Well, let me read it to you." And he just flipped to the verses like, "See right here." And God took a rib from Adam's side and he made Eve with it. It's like
like it's like you're
we're
not
just
reading
using
it
the
in the
English.
right language, you Nimrod.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
funny.
it's yeah, but I was thinking of there's this thing called creationist road trip, and you get to watch cognitive dissonance in action as the people on this road trip are confronted by fact after fact. And like at one point in the documentary,
Mm-hmm.
the scientist or whoever, or maybe it was the guy that's hosting it, who's a comedian, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, whatever. Anyways, but he pours water on the ground to like explain this thing, and the one guy's like, "Well, it's your water, like like." So he clearly demonstrated this thing, whatever the label was, I can't remember. And he's like, the backlash to it was, "It's your water," as if he now controls how the water flows and does things to dirt because he's the one that's pouring it out, I guess. Like I just feel like, here, now it's your water. You pour it out and see what happens. But it was just, you just go, wow. This
Yeah,
is and of course, what's scariest, of course, is always to remember we can be hit with cognitive dissonance at any moment.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so, because of that, we should be skeptical unless we have evidence or test or a valid and sound
Yeah.
argument.
This is why you probably would like. Well, I don't know. You'll definitely get a lot out of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, because it goes a lot into this. Because like he made that recognition that most people, when they're making moral decisions, aren't using, they aren't using their logical skills to the best of their abilities. It's only
Oh yeah,
when,
that I will also agree with.
yeah,
Unfortunately,
yeah.
now, I
And
think
like,
if we could all use our logical skills, then I think it would be better. But I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And I
What,
think a
what,
lot of like in order to kind of get outside of that, because like we're all built with our own value frameworks, and like the things that we have are limitations of able to think about logically.
a
Uh,
righteous mind, you say?
when we have our some sort of like interconnected groups of people of diverse opinions and political stances and personalities and things like that, that gives us a better stance at being able to actually get at the truth behind everything, which is
Absolutely,
yeah,
and yeah, that's why you should listen to as many different views, and
yeah,
that's why censorship is so terrible and awful. Is
yeah.
because oh, you can't say that, and no, this is gonna hurt somebody's feelings, and I'm like, you know what? I don't care. Shut up. Whatever. I'd rather know what the truth is
Mhm.
than live with a lie. So
Yeah,
uh, 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 yeah. Anyways, okay. So yeah, it was good to talk to you.
yeah, yeah. This was a lot of
I
fun.
tried to end this earlier, but that's fine. Whatever. I don't know. I've got like a million links to send you at this point because I mentioned like 20 different things, and I'm going to forget most of them.
Oh no.
So thanks. Do you have anything to YouTube, Twitter, anything that you want to throw out there and promote?
Sure. Yeah, I'm active on Twitter. It's just writer John Buck. It's at writer John Buck, and I also have like one video on my YouTube channel. That's I think you watched like some of it. It's called what is metaphorical truth, and that's also on my channel called writer John Buck. So if you guys want to watch that, it's a long video and it's not my best work, but at least has like a lot of some of the ideas that I've been trying to work through lately on in there.
All right. Hey, look, you got some Minecraft thing going on.
Yeah, yeah. It was my old channel, but I actually have two channels. I think
Oh
probably
man.
one's writer John Buck, and then
Oh
another
man.
one's just John Buck.
All right. I know what to do. I know what to do now. There you go. You're welcome. Okay.
There we go. Nice.
Oh, the main gun's here. Sorry, main gun. I'm wrapping up. My brain's toast. You'll have to go back and listen to whenever the hell we started this insanity. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
And that. No, not that. That's the button.